All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Lucy Richards, and today is April 3rd, 2025. It is 6:01 p.m., and this is the meeting of the City of Helena Planning Commission. As chair, I would like to call us to order. And first, we will do a roll call of Planning Commission members, and then everyone else can go around and introduce themselves. So myself, Lucy Richards.
Mike Newhouse, Vice Chair.
Maddie, the trustee.
Well, we have a quorum of all three of our members. Welcome, Maddie, to our group. And so with a quorum, we can conduct business. Other people present like to introduce themselves appropriately.
Sure. Kyle Holly, City of Helena Planner.
Diana Hammer, Helena Citizens Council District 1.
John Andrew, Helena Citizens Council.
Katie Ryan, Helena Citizens Council District 5.
Denise Rothbarber, Helena Citizens Council District 7.
I'm Jay Seaton. I'm Helena Citizens Council District 4.
And Hellstrath Citizens Council District 2.
Kelly Ray, planner for the city.
I'm Chris Brink from the city.
I'm Ben Kuiper, HCC District 4. I'm also the chair.
And I'm April Sparks, admin for the Community Development Department.
And then online, it looks like we have.
So we have 3 attendees online, two attendees online in addition to our contractors. We'll go ahead and go to Cody.
Yeah, I'm Cody Ferguson, project manager for the Helena Forward Land Use Plan.
So Cody, we cannot hear you for whatever reason. Just a minute, let me see what's going on here.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Go ahead and try again, Cody.
Okay, can you hear me now?
No.
No?
Cody, I can hear you, so it's interesting that they can't hear you.
Oh, can you hear Oscar?
I don't even know if they can hear me.
Okay,
I
Cody
think it might be them.
Okay, so we are having some issues with the speaker. It was working perfectly like 10 minutes ago.
It never fails. That's the way it goes.
Right, so
That is
disconnect, reconnect.
Yeah, good way to send a message. I think they got it, but I was like, I think it's just to make sure.
Oh man, knock on wood, my internet works.
Yeah,
Chris,
yeah,
can you hear us?
True.
I once watched The Princess Bride in Spanish and don't speak Spanish, and it was still delightful. So I think I can do this.
That's funny.
Well,
I wonder if we need to back out and back in.
I mean, I would think it's them,
Okay.
given that we can hear each other and we can hear them. But we can try if you want to leave and come back.
All right.
I'm guessing that.
Okay.
Let's just drop off.
You want to try it?
Oh, can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great.
Oh, great.
Okay, great. Well, it's good to hear you guys and see you guys. I'm Cody Ferguson with House of Levine. I'm the project manager for the land use plan.
Go ahead, Oscar.
I was going to say, I was like, are you teeing me up to introduce myself? My name is Oscar Martinez. I am the assistant planner for the land use plan from House of Levine.
All right, welcome everyone.
Then we have 2 other participants, attendees online. Go ahead, Mary.
Hi, I'm Mary Harlow. I'm with the Helena League of Women Voters, local government chair for the league.
And Maxwell.
I'm Maxwell Milton. I'm interested citizen. I'm also a member of the local government committee of the League of Women Voters, and I'm with Resilient Helena and Sleeping Giant Citizens Council. And I think the city and county plans are really critical for how we design the community. So I'm excited to learn more about the draft.
All right, is that everyone, April?
That is everyone.
All right, thank you everyone for being here. And so with that, we will move on into approval of minutes, the next item, although April has told me the minutes are not quite ready. So we will table that item for a later meeting and move on to regular items. Item A, review chapters 1 through 5 of the land use plan. Yay. And I'm assuming, April, that Cody Ferguson is going to take us through that.
Yes, and you should be able to share your screen, Cody.
Okay. Looking for the share button on here. Let's see here. There it is. All right, can everybody see that?
Yes, we can.
Great. All right, so we're going to talk about essentially the first half of the draft plan tonight. In 2 weeks, we're going to talk about the second half. And everybody should have received a link last week where they could go on and view the chapters, review it, and put comments, kind of live comments from everybody. And so if you didn't get the link, let us know. We can make sure you get that after the meeting, because we'd really like to have your comments. But this is the first half. We're going to take what we hear tonight and begin making revisions. You should get the second half next Thursday or next Friday. And we'll kind of repeat this process again, take those revisions, and then move us on toward making this draft plan more of refining it into something that's closer to what the final plan might look like. So with that, there we go. So our agenda, we'll do a really quick update on where we are, and then we're going to review the chapters. I think what we'll do is, I think we should have time. We can kind of go through chapter by chapter, and after I kind of discuss the overall structure. And for each chapter, or each element, if you have comments or questions, I'll introduce it, and then we can just jump into that chapter and give you each chapter some time. If your edits are copy edits, so if they're punctuation, if they're spelling, you don't necessarily need to bring those up here. We can grab those from comments that you leave in the live draft that you have the link to. Really, we're looking for bigger picture things, right? So I'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into it. So the planning process update, if you guys remember, this project is roughly 15 to 18 months. It has 6 steps, and they're basically broken down into these 3 parts: establish where we are today, define where we want to go, and then establish the roadmap for how we get there. And tonight we are moving on to step 5 and 6. We have defined where we want to go in terms of the vision and goals and future land use. But now we're starting to turn the corner into that roadmap, right? And so drafting guidance for how we get from the vision and goals into actual recommendations and things that could be actionable to help the vision and put the vision and goals into effect, right? To make Helena the community that all the folks who have been involved in the process up to this point have identified they would like to see it be in the next 15, 20 years. So the plan elements, the way the plan is structured is it's essentially, I think we have 10 chapters here because we ended up actually combining 2 of them. So the next one, we say 6 through 11, but it's actually 6 through 10. We're going to talk about the first 5 tonight. So we'll have an introduction, then we provide some plan context, and then the vision and goals, and then we get into land use and development, and that's very much tied to kind of building from existing land use, and then taking the vision and goals that we worked with through public engagement to craft and turning those into recommendations for recommendations that will actually how land ought to be used on the ground. And then we'll talk about the housing and neighborhoods chapter. So the introduction, as hopefully you all were able to read, addresses, what is the land use plan. So it's, situating this in relation to other plans that Helena has undertaken and put into effect. The planning process in relation to state statute, what's required by state statute. And then basically previewing how the plan was created. So the process itself, what the planning process was, the role of community engagement, and then how to use the plan. So in plan context, we talk about the regional context. As I mentioned, past planning efforts. We give a demographic snapshot as it pertains to issues and opportunities that Helena will be facing, and then community engagement. And then we try to, in the pages of this chapter, of course, provide text, hopefully not too text heavy, but text to provide some context for Helena and the planning process, and then also what has been undertaken so far, right? So, we have statistics on Helena's population, its growth since 2010, the racial ethnic composition, and how that's changed, the age, average age, and how that has changed. We provide some background on housing, income, poverty, educational attainment, and then we provide some background on the community engagement process that we've undertaken as part of the planning process, including the map of from Map Social. And then in the plan itself, we also include a map of where we've gotten online participation with the survey. So to demonstrate kind of spatial distribution of engagement so far in the process. So before I move into the next chapter, does anybody have any kind of initial thoughts, things you've been thinking about since you first got this in your hands digitally and started reading through it? Think places that we need to improve, things that you'd like to see. I will just open it up and Oscar and I are taking notes.
Ben.
So Ben Kuiper, for the record. Since the development of this plan, there was a change in the community involvement portion of this. Have we thought about how that's going to impact this plan moving forward?
There was a change in community involvement.
A judge ruled on the Montana law that the community involvement needs to be more than just the initial phase.
Oh, yeah, that is something we can revisit. Has there been a change in the legislature with regard to community involvement, like during this session?
As far as I know, it was just stopped by a judge from the last session, the 23 session. If anybody has any.
So
Lucy, so all that I know is that several of the other bills from the 2023 session were stopped, but it didn't directly impact this one. Don't know if there's something new. And I've been vaguely tracking a few other related bills this session that haven't become effective yet or signed that could have implications, but that is all that I really know about what is going on.
Okay, thank you as well, but that was
sorry.
And house.
Pardon me, Ben, at the end there, I lost what you were saying. I think it's probably just the position of the microphone. Sorry, it's been a long week. Could you repeat what you said there, Ben?
Yeah, I just said I could possibly be mistaken, so I think you're correct on that, but just in case it did involve this land use plan, we should probably look out for that.
Okay. The one thing I will say as far as community engagement, and we can work with you and city staff more on this, but we do have an open house plan for the public. So when we have the draft plan, you guys feel good about it, and you're ready for it to go out to the public, we'll have a big open house in which people can come by and we'll basically make boards for the chapters and have, drafts available online if that's something you choose to do, and take comments and have another round of feedback and community engagement once the plan is ready to go out for public distribution.
And
And Hauser, just to follow up on what Ben said, my understanding was that what the judge halted was the fact that the plan was to be front-loaded and basically all of the public input to be in the planning, the zoning, and the subdivision ordinances. And after that, be only by administration without public input. And my understanding is that restriction was halted by a judge. Is that what you're understanding?
Yeah. Like I
And so
said,
if we could get more clarification
Yes.
on what
Yeah.
this means.
Hey, Cody, this is Chris.
Yeah.
So Ben, it's the Maid case. You're familiar with the Maid case.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. Now I recognize what we're talking about. Yep.
So it doesn't affect the land use plan process because this is front loaded. This is a big public engagement piece. It's when we get to the administrative processes later in the zoning and subdivision regs that we'll address when we get to that stage of the implementation. But I think we're heavily involved relative to public engagement in this land use plan as it was intended. So it's later tools that we need to make sure when we get to that outside of this process that we go back and reevaluate the public participation piece, the public's
Yeah.
right to know. So
And this is Lucy Richards, and so that would be why this was the one bill that did not get stopped by the judge, because it was about creating the land use plan and front loading the process, while the other two bills are currently under the injunction.
Correct.
And for what it's worth, Cody, sorry, Ellie here. Senator Mandeville is working on some text amendments in coordination with the League of Cities and Towns to try and deal with some of these issues that were raised in the Maid case that the judge took fault with. But there was, I think, if I remember correctly, Chris, from the phone calls, they were conflating like the new Montana Land Use and Planning Act to outreach, the public participation plan, and how we're conducting all this front loading of outreach with the public against what is in the Montana Land Use and Plating Act.
Mm-hmm.
So, right, there are some.
it's probably not the venue to get into the
No.
details of the merits of the case, but from a front loaded standpoint, this is exactly what we're doing. So.
Yeah. So
But
my yeah. So that's oh, go ahead.
Ann Housworth, I have a question on page 11. Is that where I'm there for asking? It's under the housing units, median household income.
Yep.
So under income, there seems to be a discrepancy in terminology. You talk about the number of residents earning 150,000 or more, and then you talk about households. And so I think education as make them both the same.
Yeah, that is a good point and a good catch. Looking at page 11 right now. So yeah, that is a good catch. And sometimes yeah, making sure we're consistent with the terminology is important. So thank you for bringing that up. Sometimes we interchange them so often when we're in it that we stop seeing it. That's why it's great to have you guys read it. Any other comments on this first chapter?
I have a question. Cody, this is Diana Hammer. I'm with HCC. I was looking, well, two things. I don't think I got a link. I don't know if other HCC members got a link to the live chapter.
This is Lucy. I don't think any of us got the
okay.
live link, so we're all on the.
Okay. So that was my first question. And then the second one, on the map social, I was wondering, and maybe this is on the live link, if we could look more granularly at all these dots. I was wondering what they were and what the concerns were, because it's
yeah, we can certainly kind of provide some of the data of that, but you can actually go online and look at them yourself. So if you go onto the project website, you go to Map Social, you can click on this map that's here and you can click on them individually. Or you can pull up individual maps that people have created and see what one person thought was important. And so, yeah, I would encourage you, if you haven't yet gone and played with that, take a look. But yeah, if we want to include a little more in-depth analysis about or summary of what came out of Map Social, we can certainly do that. We can look at doing that going forward.
Oh, sorry, this is Maddie. I think we need to see what everyone thought, the consensus. I don't know what reports could come out of it.
This is Kyle. There seems to just be a file issue here because all the HCC members, all the circles and dots are black and not in color. Like, so
in
file the issue going on.
In the
version
I printed this from the
okay,
materials
well,
of this today, so I don't know. But
And Anne had a comment.
Ann Helsrath, on community engagement, was the disability community particularly invited into the community engagement process?
They were invited. We actually did stakeholder interviews with representatives from the disabilities community. As far as I mean, the invitations went out. We made sure we had our public meetings noticed in places that were ADA accessible. But if there's some concern about the disability community not having enough involvement, that's something we could certainly look at improving. So, yeah.
So Lucy Richards for the record. So what I'm hearing so far, in addition to what Ann Hauser just said, is that probably just how the printing has gone, some of the dots are hard to read on some of the maps, so that could be stuff we could clean up later. And I am liking the idea of, I hesitate to say appendix or addendum, but a greater breakout of what the comments were on maps. So obviously, we could consolidate, you could consolidate them some, similar comments, that type of thing, get a slightly more in-depth look than the brief summary.
So just for clarification, April, we had to compress the PDF file in order to put it on the website. So that is probably what caused that issue with the map, but it's a limitation of putting things on our website.
This is Lucy. I understand that very well. But do other people think that creating some sort of breakout of all of the comments on Map Social is a good idea?
Absolutely.
We also have hand raised Mary Harlow.
Ms. Harlow?
Okay, I just unmuted myself, but I have some questions here too. I have one clarification on the issue with the citizen participation. The judge found it to be in violation of the Montana Constitution, which allows citizens' participation in all parts of any discussion. So that was a big thing, and I know the legislature hasn't addressed that yet. So seems like the prior 2023 bill is still is being used until the legislature comes out and corrects that language in that bill. I think we're stuck with what's happening right now. I have a question too on 15,471 flyers being counted in as public participation. Actually, 15,000 flyers in the water bill is actually and notifications. It's not exactly public meetings. So I think it's overstated to include that number. And also, I think that I'm missing something here in public participation, that you didn't have any public meetings at say 5 o'clock 5:30 when people get off work, because there's a lot of other people in this community that aren't retired or don't have the ability to attend a meeting in the middle of the day. So if you're going to do a community meeting, I would suggest that maybe you could contact the library and set up a community meeting. And I'm sure the HCC could put out publicity and the league could put out publicity on it to get the public out, to make sure that they're all involved, because this is going to affect all of our futures. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm happy to respond to that, or if city staff wants to, however.
Whichever, I can respond, Cody, and then you can fill in blanks if I miss anything.
Yeah.
Barry, for those comments. I do just want to note that with these public outreach events, they were a blend of daytime and evening. The stakeholder interviews were predominantly conducted during daytime business hours when the stakeholders were representing themselves on behalf of the industry they work in or the other sector that they're involved with. And the outreach meetings that we conducted separately for the public were done in the evening hours, much like this meeting is being held tonight. We also had a lot of pop-up events actually at the library with staff who were there to try and solicit comments from members of the public, and in other places too. And I know, Chris, you've done outreach with the league, the farmers market on the weekends. So it was a blend of different times of day where we were soliciting input from the public. And of course, all of the digital trainings that we've received were provided as people found time to do so.
And Lucy Richards, for the record, and I'd like to add too, I think city staff has done a great job with these outreach efforts. Obviously, there are limitations no matter how you go about it. But I think it's important for all of us to note that this remains a draft at the moment. So our meeting tonight and our meetings going forward will also continue the community engagement process.
Generally speaking, these large sort of public meetings that we're doing to solicit responses, including the, we called it the DIY workshop. I'm losing the plot here. Community visioning workshop, sorry. And indeed the HCC meeting where they met the week prior to that event. Those were all evening hour events as well. And we generally try to hold those outside of business hours when they're just broadly to the public.
But yeah, the one comment I would make about the flyers, you know, the 15,471 flyers, we are really careful not to. It's hard to quantify the quality of outreach when we have so many different forms. So you know, we know that we sent flyers out to everybody. We know that there were flyers, posters, sandwich boards, but we've been careful not to make not to present a like an overall sum of all the points of outreach. And that's a decision that we made to try to clarify, you know, these are touch points, but they're not necessarily all weighted the same. So it's more expressing the effort and the response. But yeah.
And Mr. Maxwell, that's his hand raised.
Yeah, so you let the audio thing come up because it wasn't there before. So I just need to raise my hand. That works. Is that how it is? Is that all I need to do is raise my hand? Because I didn't have an audio button until you invited me.
The way the Zoom meeting is set up, only presenters can unmute themselves.
All right,
so
good.
I give you permission to talk, so you can unmute yourself while you have permission to speak.
Gotcha. Thank you. So I guess if we're going through this first chapter on page 5, that vision, goals, draft and final land use plan, the top paragraph under draft and final land use plan. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So it says the plan informs planning initiatives that affect the city at the local, county, and regional levels. The plan should aid and inform regional efforts related to housing, transportation, transit, trails, natural resources, which is great. And as you guys probably know, we're involved, the county's doing a growth policy, and there's a joint infrastructure study to look at, where the city might be able to extend city infrastructure. And then there's, because of our MPO status, there's a regional transportation plan happening with East Helena, and the county. And I guess I wrote down this question when I read this, is what does this actually mean? And what are we saying the city's role is in the regional kind of planning outcomes? And by regional, I mean, say that what we call the Helena bathtub that we talk about in the Helena growth area for the county plan.
Yeah, and I can start that, Max, and then Ellie and Chris, if you want to jump in. But that when we talk about these long range plans, it's hard to quantify all the different ways in which the city will interact with its various jurisdictions, and then to predict that over time. So part of it is quite generally an emphasis on kind of continued coordination on all of the things that cross, that affect both the county, the city, neighboring jurisdictions, whether it's East Helena or North Helena Valley. And so part of it's general expressing, that Helena does do this. We're recognizing that it's not an island, and that this is a continued emphasis and priority for the city as it's thinking about its own planning. When we get into recommendations in implementation, we'll have some more specific recommendations for, whether it's participation in the MPO, whether it's, participating in, the planning area itself, for this plan. It actually extends beyond the city boundaries into its kind of extraterritorial areas. So coordinating with the county or neighboring jurisdictions on those issues. So that's, I don't know if there's much more to answer there other than to say, looking forward as far as an aspirational document, which these plans tend to be somewhat aspirational because we're looking 10, 20 years out, making sure there's an emphasis and priority on
You're muted, Cody.
No, I think we lost our speakers.
No, I think you guys are good. I think this is a Cody issue this time.
Okay, thanks, Oscar, for confirming.
Yeah, no problem. I didn't want you to think it was you and then complicate matters.
So Mary has her hand raised again. Just a minute. Go ahead.
I have a question, Cody. What is the possibility of adding in a greenway across the valley connecting Helena and East Helena? I had heard at our public meeting last week that there was interest in the participants at that meeting having a greenway like that to be able to tie them all in together. I think when you look at planning for residential areas, the green areas are really important. And even when you talk about putting together condos and things like that, I think you've always got to look at that green area because that is exactly what people want. They don't want to have to live in a lot of brick and mortars and paving. They want to have some green areas. And I didn't really feel you addressed that in your plan, but can you talk to that?
You hit the nail. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Good. No, Mary, your intuition and what you heard is exactly correct. I mean, I think many comments and engagement received actually had to do with the desire to protect and preserve, the open space and natural areas and parks and trails and expand them, moving forward. It's just a matter of this that part of the plan is in the second half of the chapters. So we have a park and open space and natural environment section. And then when we get to the individual goals, I'll review that in a minute. When we get to the goals, that's reflected. And then the future land use map. What I would say about there being kind of a regional greenway, if that's something that's in the works and it's something that people would like to see happen, I think we should definitely talk about, whether that's not something that goes into the document. It is an aspirational document, and we're trying to imagine what we want Helena to look like in 20 years, and if that's something that people want to see, it's something I think we ought to consider. In terms of time, because I realize we're going to get to some of these questions that we might get to in the later chapters. Unless there are any actual revisions, I think on this, it might be good to move ourselves along a little bit if there aren't any objections.
Lucy Richards, no objections. Move us along, Cody.
Okay. Okay, now my computer's not working. What's going on here? There we go. Went too far. There we go. So that the next chapter is the vision and goals. Many of you will be familiar with this. We crafted these and kind of refined them together in the vision and goals of land use memo. And so, we have a vision statement. Helena is a community rooted in history, opportunity, and legacy. It is an exceptional place to live, work, raise a family, start and grow a business, and visit. Over the next 20 years, Helena will continue to capitalize on its distinctive character, welcoming atmosphere, and plentiful access to public lands to be a livable, resilient, and sustainable community. And then we add some meat to the bones there with our statements that follow. And then we take those guiding principles, the history, opportunity, and legacy, and try to frame that really as organizing principles that can then guide the recommendations in the plan and guide the structure of the plan. And that is something that I would ask you guys to pay attention to. It's something that, this is a draft, and the next few chapters, the next 5 chapters you can get are a draft. But this is really where we start to look at, okay, do these guiding principles, do this vision statement, how well do they kind of weave themselves through the plan itself and the recommendations, and the goals also. And so the goals, Mary, this is for you. The park, open space, and natural resources, right? We have some goals in there that we worked together on earlier to continue to conserve and steward Montana's land, air, water, and serve as a model for sustainability and resilience, and to support an extensive parks and open space and trails network, and continue to monitor opportunities to increase and secure outdoor recreational access and improve the wayfinding and safety of trails. With that, I mean, these things are things I think that all of us are somewhat familiar with. Does anybody have thoughts on the vision and goals chapter?
I have a comment. I recognize some of this language from the 2019 growth policy. And
could you say your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Diana Hammer with HCC. I'm trainable. Yeah, I was really pleased to recognize some of the 2019 language because I thought some of that was really good, and I'm happy to see it reflected here.
Ann Houserath. I attended the open house at the Civic Center, and I'm very pleased that from what I heard from my table and the others that you seem to have captured very well what I heard at that session.
This is Maddie. I also attended some sessions, and I believe that you have captured incredibly well, like in order of the areas of concern, specifically related to cost of housing. Those things are huge right now. So, good job.
This is Lucy Richards. I'm not seeing any other comments or questions. And I also believe it is an excellent job of capturing everything we've discussed at the Planning Commission meetings leading up to this as well, which came out of all of those community settings.
All right.
So if you
Um,
want,
okay. Onward.
and upward or something.
Yeah, or something. All right, there we go. The next chapter, land use and development. So this is when we really get into the meat of recommendations, right? We set the stage. We identified, from the process so far with the vision and goals will be in the plan. And then the land use and development kind of lays the foundation for literally on the map, where certain types of uses ought to go in the future. It's not zoning, right? This isn't regulatory. This is a guide that when the city gets into zoning and subdivision regulations, it can use these, it can use this to, based on the public process, to come up with ways to implement that in a way that is regulatory. So future land use is really built around this map, the future land use map. And for this, we actually created some different kind of use categories than have existed in previous plans for the city, based on changes that have happened in the city, changes in priorities, changes in trends of what people are maybe looking for in the kind of lifestyle they want, to better reflect not only, I think, the city that people live in and want to live in, but also reflecting some of the larger trends in land use that we're seeing, and ways to guide it in ways that are more sustainable and take advantage of the existing infrastructure and build out in a fiscally responsible and sustainable manner. So on this map, within the boundaries, the municipal boundaries, here, I'm just gonna move that over. You can see we have, different colors representing different things. Outside the municipal boundaries, we extend out into the extraterritorial area some of those same land uses, right? Anticipating that those areas will likely become part of the city. Right now, they're somewhat functionally part of the city. And so rural areas are that light green. We created basically two classifications of residential that exist outside of the downtown, or three, I should say, that exist outside of downtown. Downtown we treat as its own thing. And so we have that suburban residential. Think about that as larger lots, larger square footage houses, predominantly single family homes. Within that category, there can exist the potential for some multifamily if it's appropriate. So potentially duplexes, but the predominant character of those areas will be single family homes on relatively large lots. Then in the orange, this is what we're calling urban residential. And urban residential is, go ahead.
Cody, generally, I am very impressed by this plan. I do have a question about the suburban residential and the fact primarily accommodates single family detached homes. It's only 3-point-something units per acre. Saw somewhere that the household size was only 2.2 or something. I'd like to know the rationale for that when we're trying to build walkable places where there are different sizes of units and things that people can age in place. Could you explain more the rationale for saying primarily single family detached?
Yeah, so I think you're anticipating the next chapter, right, where we talk about the densities and housing. And so when we're looking toward in the housing framework, and we'll get to that more specifically in a minute, but what we did with the densities was we looked at, what is the existing density in those areas right now? And is there a place for is that land pattern likely to exist? Is there a desire for it to exist? And then are there places where we can build density that make more sense, right? And so if you notice on North Montana Ave, north of Custer, up to the top of the planning area, everything within a certain distance on either side, we actually plan for much more dense development, including land that isn't yet developed, with the idea that Montana is being, a major arterial, north-south arterial connecting into those neighborhoods, that makes the most logical place because of the location of infrastructure and transportation to actually build that kind of density. And then where it already exists, maintaining that kind of density in the areas that are already walkable, right? And within our recommendations, making improvements in the areas that are already lend themselves to walkability and that kind of active transportation connectivity, make improvements to improve that in places where it's feasible. There will always be, as much as we would love to see, and I live right in the heart of Central Helena, and one of my favorite things about it is that it is walkable. There will always be a desire. There will always be folks who have a different vision for the kind of life that they want, and are not as attracted, right, to smaller lot size or more dense neighborhoods. And so he's tried to maintain where it made sense, some of those, but really put an emphasis on trying to extend that urban residential area, out north into the valley along Montana, into some places in the eastern part of the city that aren't yet developed, to try to ensure that where there is infrastructure and there is transportation, that we can facilitate those land uses that facilitate walkability and active transportation, and also are just, quite frankly, more fiscally sustainable. It costs more to run pipe and roads out to less dense areas, right, per resident than it does in more dense areas. So I hope that kind of answers the question a little bit.
And how's that again? It does. I guess I take umbrage with the should primarily, because as an aspirational document going out several years, this kind of density, this kind of single emphasis on single is going to be more car dependent, and it's going to cost all of us more for the infrastructure. So I guess that's my that's my concern. That should probably, I'm uncomfortable with that, but I understand your reasoning.
Yeah.
Sorry, Cody, it looks like you have another question. Barbara with HC. Can you show me, well, first of all, I don't quite understand technology and innovation in a land use context.
Yeah.
And I a little line in the blue-green spectrum, to tell you the truth. But for those of us who are, I have a hard time sort of discerning between the very green rule and the light blue technology and innovation. And the only technology and innovation chunk of land that I see is just east of the airport. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Those of us still challenged, if you could maybe change the coloring a little bit better for viewing, because I think if you're on a website and or on your computer, you can see things a lot better, but once it gets you lose some of that. So I'm just recommending from a presentation point of view, maybe changing those colors, but I'm still back to my original question, which is what is technology and innovation in a land use context?
Yeah. So essentially we have two land uses here. There are two different shades of blue, light blue and dark blue. Technology innovation is that light blue strip, and essentially you're right, it's just northeast of the airport. And then that dark blue is we call it medical and healthcare. And we played around with different names for both of these. We just decided on the most simple. So up until very recently, these areas would probably be classified as office or office park, or office and professional services. And what we talked about with city staff was the reality, like looking forward, office parks, I mean, there are office buildings spread throughout Helena. There's actually a tremendous amount of space within existing buildings for offices, but office spaces in the traditional office use, especially since the pandemic, but in light of new technology, have become less important, right? And so looking forward, if there already is, I mean, you've got stretches of industrial that go along the train tracks south of the airport. There's a lot of potential with several employers, industrial, kind of high paying industrial jobs related to Boeing, and some of the other kind of aeronautics and industrial manufacturers that are likely to locate in that industrial strip. And then you get some bleed over from the technological stuff that's happening kind of Gallatin County area, right? That we associate with the photonics industry and quantum computing. But with Helena having this kind of concentration of heavy industry related to aeronautics, and then having with the airport there for transportation, other infrastructure, and then just proximity to things that are happening in other parts of the state. The thought was we should have some space that could be developed. It might be an office park or campus setting, but really pointed toward attracting industries that are more technology and innovation based. And it could be anything from an extension of what's going on with photonics and quantum computing, or some element of that, or it could be, looking more at, sustainable technologies. But the idea really was, rather than have a conventional office park, and I don't know that I would put necessarily a conventional office park out there anyway, have something in close relation to the industrial uses that can serve as an attraction for businesses that might want to put, a campus, for some technology related industry out in that area. So, and I don't know, yeah, and I know Chris and Ellie probably have some ideas about that too, if I missed anything. So.
Thank you.
Cool.
Diana Governor, HCC. Just wondering, like in terms, if we're looking at 20 or 30, maybe longer years, if we shouldn't be not concentrating like all the healthcare facilities in one area. I mean, we do live on an earthquake fault. We've got a risk of wildfire. Say there was a disaster affecting that area, we wouldn't have an alternative. So in looking forward 20, 30 years, shouldn't we also be thinking about a little more decentralized services? We aren't, our eggs in that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And actually, that's not something we had talked about that much. When our existing land use, we do have, for instance, urgent care out off Ptarmigan, out north of Custer, and there are some other distributed healthcare providers. Obviously, right where it says Prospect Ave and 11th Ave, right, in the old mall site, there's Benefice right there. So that's a good point. That's something I think we probably ought to look into a little bit deeper. Is okay, what should we have a little more distributed land use dedicated to healthcare?
This is Lucy Richards. I'm saying nodding, but I also agree with that. And I think in my day job, I see this too, but I mean, like professions attract like professions. Right now is all the doctors and hospitals and dentists have played together. But if you, in this land use plan, if we're looking at those areas where a few subsets have started setting up their clinics, I think it makes total sense what Deanna was saying, to look at putting that type of area and spreading it out. Sorry, I am losing my words tonight. It's been a long day.
The other thing that is worth noting is that these land use classifications, these designations, aren't monolithic. All of them include within the description the potential for neighborhood scale, like for instance in the residential districts, neighborhood scale commercial and other services. So for instance, you've got Pureview down on Last Chance Gulch there. It's not indicated on this map, but that's something that can be included in that district. And the existing urgent cares, the assumption is that they might go into a commercial area, an area that here is marked commercial. But I do think it's worth having the conversation about like, okay, well, we know we have Benefice, in this area off in the old mall site. Where are some other areas where we might want to just, give some consideration to, like, do we want to attract an ecosystem of, a handful of providers into that area? to better distribute services throughout the city.
Can I do a follow-up? Denise Roth Barber, follow up on the medical stuff. Most of it too is south of the railroad tracks, and we, community voted, we voted down and which we voted up, but we voted like for the building, a firehouse north of Custer, or north of the railroad tracks, but we didn't vote to fund the staffing of that firehouse. And I'm not sure when we're ever going to, but to your question about, well, where would we like some healthcare facilities? It might be good to be, you know, to look north of the railroad tracks.
Yeah.
I live right by the hospital, so all of this conglomeration is super convenient for me. But you know, there's so many people, and a lot of our growth is. So I would just, you know, where some of that suburban residential is up north of Custer, there's some medical buildings up there.
And this is Maddie. I don't see, it's really hard to see the colors, but the St. Peter's North and Intermountain, those are all in that area. That's, I definitely would consider that medical. So I just.
Richards.
Yeah.
And I'll give some explanation too with why we designated the area of the campuses of Shade Air and St. Pete's. That infrastructure is expensive. They're ingrained in that infrastructure. They're not going to go anywhere. Sure, is there value with expanding a campus-like medical land use somewhere else in the city? Yes, but for the the urgent care and the benefits, those are allowed in the land use designations that we have for them now too. We were just trying to capture the campus they've heavily invested in their infrastructure. And the doctor's offices, the dentists, they're going to concentrate there too. We don't want to prohibit them from continuing to locate. So that's why that's fairly large. And it also covers some of the ancillary services like senior assisted living and some of those other healthcare like, but really need to be concentrated around the campus setting of St. Pete's and Shade Air. So that was our thought process, knowing that other smaller healthcare settings would be located in context and in scale with the community or the neighborhood that they're in. But we can definitely look for a larger campus option if another provider wanted to come in and invest in another medical campus and what that would look like around it. Most definitely.
And again, just to clarify a point that's already been made before, this is definitely a separate and distinct thing from zoning, which is what Chris is alluding to, right? So we know that St. Pete's are about to take over the Armory. We have, as has been mentioned, Pete's Place North. We've got all of these other clinics. There are even more, Cody, since you left town recently in the fall, even more urgent care, I feel like, scattered town. So these facilities are being embedded in other sectors or other areas in the community, and I think that's it's nice to have some competition. And this one thing, Cody, that I was going to note, and I was going to share this with you later, but since we're talking about medical and healthcare as future land use designation, I don't know if we want to build into this what Chris was mentioning with the senior assisted living facilities, anywhere that has that step level of care, or some of the group homes like Westmont operate a few that are in that area as well. Whether we want to talk about within the complementary existing land uses in the last sentence, call out some of that. I think we talked about that. It's just a comment that we made from that.
Yeah. Oscar, did you get that note?
In my notes for you guys.
Okay, great. Yeah,
Great.
I got it too, though.
Awesome. Cool.
And I agree, especially because as we get later into the chapters, I mean, and the age demographics, the whole point is this is an aging population here in Helena, for the most, I mean, it's getting older. And so there will be a lot more interest in that. And so calling it out makes sense.
Yeah.
And with regards to innovation, yeah, we had conversations, as have been mentioned, just trying to steer away from trying to promote office and business parks in the traditional sense, where you see just a giant building on a hill somewhere. with a bunch of different office uses inside of it. And we were thinking more in terms of trying to promote STEM-driven industries. That's really what we were driving home there. I don't know if that's helpful for context for people to understand, to keep it sort of separate from industrial per se, and maybe have heightened design standards eventually in those areas from a zoning standpoint.
I suspect that is why the Butte Industrial Park area is rebranding its naming of itself for that exact reason.
Yeah.
I mean,
All right. So we can certainly come back and talk more about land uses. The one thing I'll encourage, when you do look at this, is, just exactly, I think what we've said is that even though we have to kind of paint with a broad brush, right? We're not at the parcel level, even though some of these land uses are parcels or a combination of parcels. But within those, we don't preclude the potential for some other uses, right? And I think that's really valuable in thinking about, okay, within our neighborhoods, where are the gathering spaces, right? Are these pocket parks that have yet to be built? Are they small community markets or stores that don't exist but used to exist, right, in a lot of these communities? But we don't want to foreclose the opportunity that they might exist again. And if that's something that's valuable, to the community, to try to have, we don't want to let anything stand in the way of that. All right, I'm going to jump into the housing chapter.
Final comment, and then I will let you move on. I think because this map itself is a vision, right? And it's just ideas. All of the ideas that people have brought up to me, ensuring that is incorporated into the language, and just working in the idea of get the options for medical parks out past Custer, working that into the language is important, since this map is just a concept and we're not doing zoning here.
Yeah, we certainly
know if other people agree or disagree with that. And I can think about it and send some of my thoughts as well.
Okay. All right. Unless there are any objections, I'm going to move on to the housing chapter. Maybe. There we go. All right. So housing and neighborhoods, every land use plan, every comprehensive plan ought to include a housing and neighborhoods chapter. Montana is a little special in that it requires, definitely in its land use plans more than in its growth policies, but even compared to other states, a little more detailed analysis of, what is the current housing situation, what are the projected needs, and what are the plans for how to get there. And so this is our attempt to kind of satisfy that in a way that I think makes sense. I will say that like every city that's having to comply with the land use plan act, land use planning act, is having to figure out what exactly the requirements mean and what they look like on paper. And so this could still be a little bit work in progress, but I think we came up with a good way to analyze kind of our current situation, and then in a data-driven way, make some predictions for what the potential is for meeting projected needs. So this is organized and begins with a housing needs assessment, and then we get into a projected housing analysis, so projected needs and how to achieve those. And then we get into, okay, how do we get past some of the constraints to housing? That's actually something that is required by state statute, identifying constraints and then ways to remedy them. And then we get into things that are really specific to kind of neighborhoods and neighborhood character specifically. So neighborhood character, housing variability. So we talked about aging and the fact that the population of Helena is aging. In general, I think our demographics are kind of changing across the country, but a little more acute, I think, in Montana and in Helena. And so what are the best ways to kind of address that? Well, housing variability is actually a great way to do it. If you have a diverse housing stock, you give basically the potential for people to downsize into a house that fits their needs without having to leave their community and open a space for other families to come in. And then preservation and maintenance. So some issues getting at, how do we keep our neighborhoods and our housing stock in good shape, and then the actual framework itself. So jump into what it actually looks like. I'm sorry, I have a delay on my end whenever I change slides. Someday. Oh, there we go. Too far. Come back. All right, there we go. So in terms of housing needs assessment, we looked at, household by type. And so, what does the existing mix look like? Well, over half of the homes within the planning area are single family detached. A little over 6% are single family attached. So I think duplexes, triplexes, mostly duplexes. About 20% are in that 2 to 4 unit multifamily, and then 5% are the 5 to 9 unit. And then those 11.7% really represent what we think of as traditional apartment buildings. And then small part of the population that lives in either manufactured homes or this category: boats, RVs, vans, etc. Not considered unhoused, but living in one of these type of structures. One of the things we looked at is, and I know that there's a statistic right here that we call out. The median home price in Helena has increased 45.4% since 2019. I'd imagine everybody in the room is saying, that doesn't feel right. That's what the 2023 American Community Survey, which is a really conservative estimate of how much it's increased. It's based on essentially census numbers. Of course, so we did is we wanted to try to reflect that increase of 45.4%, but also added in there kind of, I wouldn't say anecdotal, but I think the Zillow and Redfin estimates that probably reflect more the experience of what people are feeling today, right? So painting the picture of this. So we heard in community engagement, I think everybody knows who lives in Helena, this feeling that housing has really become unaffordable, or is becoming unaffordable. Talk also about housing burden, and then the age of housing and when it was built. And the age of housing and when it was built, and the kind of housing that was built when it was built, sets the community on a certain trajectory, right? If you had houses tend to stick around on the land for a long time. So if you had large lots with single family homes, you're probably going to continue to have large lots of single family homes until somebody tears them down and builds something else, right? So that's why we go into all those in terms of assessing what the current housing is. Then our projected housing analysis, we actually used population projections that were provided by the Department of Commerce. Because of the pandemic and changes, there's a couple different things. One, because of the pandemic and the 2020 census numbers potentially not being as reliable as they might be otherwise. And then also just the changes that happened in terms of people moving to Montana and moving to Helena after 2020, in that period from 2020 to about 2023, there were several different projections, right, for where population might go. And so we chose this number, the compound annual growth, for a variety of reasons. One of which is that it's really hard to predict actually exactly how much Helena will grow, exactly how much the trajectory will continue. And so we picked one that was maybe a little conservative compared to the high end, but still somewhat reasonable based on the trend that kind of combines the trend that was existing before 2020 with effects after 2020. So we land on a number of, by 2045, Helena may have a population of 44,817, meaning that we would have to have housing to accommodate about 10,000 more people. Depending on how you shake out the density, that is, you know, somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 new houses, depending on the density, you know, reflecting the density of housing uses that we already have. And so what we did is we extended the density within those different land uses as it exists now. So in suburban residential, currently the areas that would fit that description have a density of about 3.73 households per acre and a little over 2 people per household. And then we did the same for urban residential. So in those areas currently, those households have between 3.73 and 9.58. So between, you know, under 4 and up to 10 households per acre, and an average of just below 2 to just over 2 people per household. Mixed use areas, about 4, you know, a little over 4 households per acre, a little over 2 people per household. And then downtown, we treat downtown a little bit differently, to be a little bit denser in terms of the number of households per acre, but smaller in the number of persons per household, right? More units, but fewer families. So it is, we took a look at you know, got the current density from those areas as they are, and then using the future land use map and the areas that we're predicting, or that we're pointing toward developing as suburban residential or residential mixed use in downtown, and then the land mass that we have included in the future land use map, calculated different numbers for how many people Helena could accommodate. And so if we were to if all the land that's included in that future land use map were developed to its full potential, depending on how it was developed. So if the bulk of development, you know, happens, I would say if all the suburban residential is fully developed out, we're going to, you know, hit that smaller number. If all the urban residential is fully developed out, we'll hit that larger number. So, you know, up to 22,000 would be the low end number of people that Helena could accommodate if everything was developed that exists within its planning area as designated within the land use map, or as high as 39,000 new residents if everything were developed kind of to its full potential. And so I guess the good news is Helena has plenty of land within its planning area to accommodate its future growth, right? I don't think, I mean, I could be wrong, but Helena is likely not going to grow by 40,000 more people. It's probably not going to grow by 20,000 more people in the next 20 years, but it's probable it could grow by 10,000. So Helena has enough space to accommodate all of these people. Why is that valuable to know? It means that the city can kind of be a little bit more selective in what it approves for housing and where it wants certain types of housing to go. Because it's not going to be as desperate. It has the potential to be able to keep up. Land is not a constraint, right? And its potential to keep up with its growth. So that's kind of the math, the back end math, or how we got to it in a pretty general sense. In terms of constraints to housing, you know, the current zoning and subdivision regulations are kind of the biggest constraint that the city has the power to address. So, you know, making sure that zoning code, subdivision regulations are aligned with meeting the housing needs and not being an obstacle to building more housing. And that they also provide the flexibility for people to build the kind of density, say in urban residential or downtown or in mixed use, to meet housing needs. And also build the diversity of housing types so you can meet needs of all people at all stages in life and all income levels, right? So we're not building only single family attached housing or, you know, on the flip side, only apartment buildings. We're building a diversity to fit a diverse and evolving population. The other constraint is really infrastructure needs and capacity, right? So we're not going to, you know, build out in the valley with houses on septic tanks, right? We got to provide water and sewer to them. And it takes time, it takes money to extend those things out. And so that would be a constraint that we address through good long-term planning, capital improvements planning aligned with the land use plan, right, after it's finalized, and in conjunction with zoning regulations and subdivision regulations. Neighborhood character, we have a portion here talking about, what are the components of quality residential neighborhoods and this idea of complete neighborhoods. The complete neighborhoods idea or theory of it, or the concept of it, is really based on this idea that neighbors or people are able to, from their homes, walk within a reasonable amount of distance to things that they need, right? So whether it's entertainment, services, healthcare, parks, they're able to get there, in a way that's safe, that supports public health, that supports community interaction. And I think that's, it's a value that we heard reflected in all of our outreach and envisioning. And I think it's something that exists in quite a few parts of Helena that looking forward, we would want to continue to encourage, whether through regulation or through other programs, that is a quality that would continue to exist. And so our recommendations are really kind of built around that. And then this is the map of where this housing could be built. So we've mapped out here, on top of the residential components of the future land use map. So we have our different residential uses, so suburban residential, urban residential, mixed use, and downtown. And then we've identified the areas that are at this scale anyway, we can identify for infill growth. So quite a few kind of within the city core, but obviously smaller parcels. Some, of course, in the eastern part of the planning area, and then some of those areas north of the tracks. And then future growth development, right? Where those areas we talked about that aren't yet developed, but there's potential to grow. And if you look at the size of the tracks that we have as future growth potential that are existing in mixed use and urban residential, there's actually a lot of land in those areas, right? So if we wanted to increase housing stock in terms of meeting the needs of future residents, there's a lot of potential for building more dense, walkable, complete neighborhoods, within the area to the southeast, but then also along Montana Ave, combined with the infill potential that we have. So I'm going to leave it there and open it up to comments, questions, concerns. Take it away.
We'll mix it up. Does anyone online have questions or comments first? If not.
Well, it looks like maybe Mary Harlow has her hand raised.
Yes, we have Mary and Maxwell.
Okay, we'll start with Mary and then Maxwell.
I want to congratulate you on this planning. It's very in-depth. I've read.
Oh, sorry, Mary. Sorry, Mary. You can go ahead and unmute.
All right. I think this is a wonderful plan. I think you put a lot of effort into this, a lot of thought. I'm really looking forward to finding out how we can make Helena a 15-minute city where everybody can walk, because everybody here likes to walk and they're all very athletic, outdoorsy people. But one of the concerns I do have is for seniors. I know that a lot of them are living in homes that we could free up for young families if we could have some other areas for them to live in. That's a real big problem here in Helena. Even the nursing homes, we don't even have that. And I'm seeing a lot of that. And actually the League of Women Voters is looking into the whole healthcare scene here, because there's a lot of areas where we are missing some of the growth. I'm also concerned about little community centers in some of these new developments because Helena does not have places for people to meet. And it's really difficult because even for the League of Women Voters to have meetings, it's $1,000 to rent a facility. And we can't do that. You know, we don't have that money, and I don't think most organizations do. So we're all over to the library, but little community centers in some of these developments would really be important. And schools, we don't talk about schools either. And that's another important part of this, and you know what that could look at, and what with the population growth and how many children we might be expecting. So, but I really like what you've done so far. It looks really good, and I thank you for the opportunity to participate in this today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Maxwell? Once
Yeah.
April gets you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think you said early on, Cody, that the implementation, and I don't know if you called it policy, when it gets really down to making things happen, that's where that'll be discussed. And what I'm thinking about, I'll just put on the table that I'm a strong towns advocate, and I've been reading a lot of their work, and their idea of the kind of incremental, you know, increasing density out from the center, where you're slowly, and I guess some kind of natural pace of evolution, moving out into some of what we now have as single family neighborhoods that are more around the edge of the commercial centers, is a better way to maximize your local infrastructure. And the way you talked about how much growth this existing map could actually contain, it sounds to me like that's part of what would need to happen. And so I'm guessing, and I think that's going to require some significant revisiting Helena's zoning approach, and also some more flexibility maybe in its standards. And I'm guessing this is kind of after the plan has been adopted, there'll be that attempt to, okay, say, now how do we do that? Having said that, and I look at this map, I'm reading the county's draft, and of course they have growth projections, and I'm not sure how much overlap there is between your, say, just to be, you know, that 50,000 number overlaps with the county saying that that might be the new number for the whole Helena Valley Plan area. And I'm not sure the city plan has to sort that out, but for somebody trying to see this holistically and how they kind of relate so that input to each plan can be useful for how we kind of get to where we want to go. I don't know if that's a comment or a question, but I guess I'm asking about this overlap piece when it comes to projections.
Yeah. And I think, you know, so the Helena, the projections we have for population, from what I understand from the Department of Commerce, actually have to do within like the Helena, within the census recognized like Helena place, right? Which I presume is likely the city limits. I don't know if it extends beyond the current municipal boundaries. And of course, the county has its own projections that would include everything. And then they likely have projections that pull out the municipalities, right? And so, yeah, I think, Max, you're right. There are some overlaps. You know, what we're saying here is that Helena is going to grow, and there's potential within the existing boundaries to accommodate some of that growth. But also, we're predicting that there is likely to be annexation and an expansion of Helena in the next 20 years that will accommodate some of that growth. And that's that's county land. So there's the overlap, right? Of where does the Helena accommodates its growth. So yeah, it's go ahead.
That further annexation, are you saying would be, I mean, like going north, be north of this map? You're really talking about going up more toward, like that urban standards boundary goes out to Sierra Road. So you're thinking that's potentially urban standards area all the way out to Sierra Road, not just to Forestville.
Yeah, I mean, what we have here is the urban standards boundary.
I thought on the joint infrastructure study, they have it going out to Sierra Road now.
Oh, it's Sierra.
Yeah, which is, I think maybe by the summer we can see how that coordinates. I mean, they're just
Yeah.
I think they're just trying to decide in that area where they could expand. They could come back and say going any farther than Forestvale is too expensive or something. That may be maybe that's going to get discussed in that study. And so it's not, and I think that the irony is that's not going to be done till next summer, not this summer. So it's kind of an interesting wrinkle in all this, but.
Yeah.
Can I make a comment?
Certainly.
The purpose of this is for the Montana Land Use Planning Act, which only the city of Helena is part of. The Lewis and Clark County did not sign on to this, so to expect Lewis and Clark County to have the same standards or ideas that the city is required to review is not a realistic expectation.
Yeah, the county technically does fall under a different law and different expectations. That being said, the current county planning process does include, future land use and projections. And there will be every attempt to try to make sure that what we do in Helena is informed and coordinated, right, with what's happening, within the region. So.
Lucy Richards and I say it would be fair to guess that the county is also paying close attention to what we are doing here as well. So there's back and forth information of what is going on, whether or not everyone agrees to the same standards or essentially has the same plan.
This is Ellie. Just to build on that, we have been having a number of meetings with the county planning staff to try and align to the best of our abilities our future land use maps, such as they are. Obviously ours is different because we only focus on what's within the urban standards boundary, and they go beyond that by a wide measure. So we are actively engaged with them. We will continue to be so. They should have, if I'm not mistaken, Chris, some of the findings with regard to the joint infrastructure study later this summer, but within a time that we can be incorporating some of that information into this plan.
Correct.
So we will make sure in as much as possible that that is reflected in here within at least the urban standards boundary conversation.
And Diana Hammer, HCC. I attended the League of Women Voters meeting last Thursday where Director Brink and Director McNally from the county and the Public Works Director, Kevin Iyer from East Helena. So it was really helpful. And I would echo what you just said. You've said much better than I could. But
You
there
can do
needs to be an alignment, a real alignment. Like what Greg McNally was saying is they know it's obvious that, the growth in the county adjacent to the city, at some point, it might be annexed. And so to the extent they can have those, the housing and the other infrastructure meet similar standards or the city standards, it would make sense. So it'd be very easy then to annex. And I thought that was such wise, forward thinking. I was really happy to hear that. And so I think it kind of echoes Max's point about we need to think about how we move forward together.
And we've had conversations about how just last week, Cody, when we were talking about how this map doesn't necessarily show the sum total of existing properties with single family homes where people, by right might want to add a second dwelling unit on their property. So that's another consideration here too. Not everybody's going to have a desire to pursue that and construct an ADU or convert an attic or build a unit over their garage or whatever the case might be. So that's something to note as well with regard to what Max was stating from the strong towns kind of conversation thought process.
Ann Hellstrand, to follow up on the strong towns, I really like this chapter. I feel it has captured the essence of what I've heard at the two open houses I went to. I would like to add a quote, which I'm doing imperfectly, but from Chuck Marohn, which is that no neighborhood should be exempt from change, and no neighborhood should have to accept extreme change. because I think this could be an overarching, I think it's very important that we moved here 3 years ago. I love the way my neighborhood is now. It's not going to stay that way. Neighborhoods should evolve. And so anyway, I really would like to add that. And then I have a couple questions on page 33 under recommendations. Do you have a definition of incompatible uses that we're going to buffer residential areas from?
Yeah, I mean, it's typically incompatible uses are understood between, we don't want to put like an industrial, we've actually tried not to in future land use map, right? Like that, the most extreme example is to put like an industrial use right next to a residential use without some way to buffer the noise and everything that might happen with an industrial use from where people live. But this actually, we've gotten a much more nuanced understanding of incompatible uses, I think, in the way that we've done planning. And so in areas where, for instance, we have a commercial use next to a residential use, there would be, the emphasis would be on buffering commercial uses that don't fit within a neighborhood setting, whether it's design standards, whether it's actually physical buffering in terms of landscaping or potentially open space, so that you don't have this rough transition from one use to the next. The other also exists between where, say, urban residential meets up with mixed use or meets up with suburban residential, or even with downtown, paying attention to, as much as possible, what that transition zone is like, right? So you don't go from single family homes to apartment buildings immediately. So we can feather the density and then start, build, if you're going from single family homes into, higher density, so you increase density slowly so it doesn't feel so abrupt. And the same with mixed use, right? So that's kind of what we meant. Incompatible is historically, it's kind of zoning language, right? It's historically, we associate it with kind of that industrial example. There might be a better word than incompatible uses. It could be, emphasizing transit, whatever the word would be, transition. I'm trying to think of a good adjective, but smooth transitions between different uses to ensure neighborhood and community cohesiveness. So we could certainly, incompatible uses sounds really kind of sterile and not nuanced enough probably for what we have there, but that was the intent of it. But that's certainly something we can wordsmith.
And Hellsworth again, thank you. I just think when we get to the zoning part, that there are going to be people who think anything different from what they have is incompatible. And so I think the more we can be nuanced on that, the better. And then in terms of the promoting transition between housing types, I guess I would ask you to consider maybe using language having to do with scale. Because again, I live that has apartments all over the place, but they're 6 to a unit. They're not a 5-story building. And then my last comment, but when I look at your little map here, I guess I would like a more older urbanism, new urbanism design that has more connectivity, a more grid-like map, because this looks to me like it's kind of car-centered. So that's, and then I think this is my last comment. That's a question. Has the state ruled on restrictions on accessory dwelling units? Because I see in the accessory dwelling units, I really love the idea of accessory dwelling units used as housing, but I don't think giving incentives if it's going to be used for short-term rentals. And so I'd like just to pay attention to what the state restrictions are.
Yeah, that's I think that's definitely something to pay attention to moving forward. Is I think generally ADUs are fairly widely accepted and even supported. But short-term rent, what you use ADUs for, is not necessarily widely supported. There's not agreement across the board on whether short-term rentals ought to be a use that ADUs, should it be prohibited, should it be regulated, should it be wide open. I think that's something we ought to continue thinking about as we move forward is there a place in the plan? Does the community feel that, moving forward, we need to look into short-term rentals? And should this be something that could guide policy toward that? So I think it's definitely something to consider and to keep thinking about.
Chair Richards, Mary Harlow has her hand raised.
Mary.
Thank you. I have a question about modular homes. I know there's some areas of the city where we do have trailer parks. They've been here for a really long time, and maybe some of them, and I haven't driven through them. I did have a cousin that lived in one for a while, but she passed away. But I'm wondering if that isn't areas where, there might be some urban renewal in the future where you might consider putting in modular homes. They are building them quite well now. And the fact is that we do have a shortage of materials, we have a shortage of skilled workers. And I'm thinking that maybe that might be something innovative to look at. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, and I think that, I'll go ahead.
Sorry, Cody, I was just gonna state really quickly, Mary, that the city of Helena we don't restrict whether a single family home, as just an example of a housing type, is either stick built, manufactured, or mobile. So long as it, is on a foundation and tied into city services, you're good to go. With regard to ADUs, the state does not place any restrictions on whether the ADUs that are built, that are were promoted through the 2023 legislation, be rental units or ownership opportunities or otherwise. There's no regulation about whether people can build them and have them be STRs, short-term rentals, or not. I had another thought that I was going to say that was going to build off of that, but I got pregnancy brain, so I'm just not. I lost control.
I didn't want to interrupt Mary and Helseth, but what I was concerned about is if the state restricts the city's ability to set regulations on ADUs.
They do not, but they did preempt us with that regulation because we actually are much more progressive with our regulatory regime with regard to the type of second dwelling unit that you could have in the community.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Anyone else with questions, comments?
Sure. I have a process question about appropriate.
Yes.
Could we just get a brief rundown on after the April 17th date when we have the overview of the second half, what next steps should be considered for the next few months regarding going forward?
That is an excellent question. So
It
whoever.
was on his agenda.
It's on Cody's agenda to get there. So I think once we're finished reviewing all of the current chapters, we'll get to the next steps.
So I just add my final comment to all of this. I think that the words we use in the narrative in this are very important, obviously, because they are what create the word picture for everyone. And I was I think this chapter 5, it's good reading. Like Anne was saying, I really enjoyed it. The map really spoke to me because I had this notion just driving around Helena, looking at the land, that there was not nearly as much opportunity for infill and outward building as there is. So I am very pleased by this analysis that shows we really do have the capacity to build out 10,000 plus people moving into our town, and we're not locked in. So that's my only comment really on this.
Cool. Well, if there aren't any more, I can move on to kind of next steps and wrapping things up, and we can get to after.
There was one.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I think it came up in the Thursday meeting and again today, the 15-minute city and the complete neighborhoods. I think we might have heard those terms before, but I think the general public probably isn't as familiar, I'm wondering if we could kind of give some more examples and like with this opportunity. I was really encouraged to see that we have all this infill potential and growth potential because I was actually kind of shocked to see that. But that is an opportunity to kind of rethink how we grow in those areas. And if we could give some examples, since this is kind of a vision and aspirational document, maybe make that more tangible for people. What could that really look like if we were growing out in this green area? And like out from my house, I could either bike or walk, and public transportation isn't an option in Helena, but but I could get to the library or a grocery store, or maybe a medical. So I think just the more we can make it tangible for people who aren't as familiar would be really super helpful.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. And it's something we can certainly build more in. Whether they're photos of similar kind of examples of like, within this area, this is what this could look like, or their drawings. We have ways of doing those things. Also call outs, we have the concept of complete neighborhoods, but we can do some stuff with better explaining kind of the 15-minute community, or there's 15 minutes, there's 5 minutes, there's 10 minutes, there are different kind of scales, but yeah, we can put something in there to help explain what this ideal is that we're trying to get toward.
Great, thank you.
All right, Cody, take us home.
Cool. All right. So next steps. So we are going to get you the second half. I have chapters 6 through 11 here, and I think I've got to look and see if somehow I've forgotten a chapter. I don't think we did. We combined 2 chapters at the end, and so it should probably 6 through 10. We're going to get those to you the 10th, and then we'll meet the 17th. And between now and then, we will be taking everything that you guys said on the first half of the plan. We'll be making revisions. We'll take everything that you guys say on the second half of the plan, make revisions, and then we will identify a date. We'll have a full draft to you to review. And then we'll work with city staff to decide what the and with you guys and kind of pull you guys to decide like what's the best format for continuing to review the plan itself, the draft itself. And then I would anticipate I have to look at the calendar, I don't have in front of me, but by June, July, if not a little bit sooner, we should have a draft that is close or close enough to final that you all feel confident that we can put it out for the public in the open house, put it online, and start getting public feedback. And then we can take that public feedback, refine it, and when we feel like it's ready to give to the City Council and Planning Commission for review and adoption, that's what we'll do. And so we can certainly share, like I said, I don't have it in front of me right now. We can share more firm dates on that timeline with you all. But that's kind of the rough trajectory of where we're going. I would say, next time, I don't know, Ellie and Chris, if the Planning Commission and the Helena Citizens Council didn't get the link where they can make comments, if that's something we want to share. So you guys, you have the draft electronically, and you can put some comments on there, and then, anything you didn't say tonight or anything you noticed, you can put more detailed comments in there, and then we can go in and look at that. We can certainly share that link with everybody. And then for the next chapters, if you guys would like to receive it that way, we can share it that way as well. So that's really all I have, except to remind everybody to go on the website and encourage people to keep track of the process. And that's it. Before I let you go, any questions, things we didn't cover, we need to cover?
Cody, you just want to say that April will get that link out, the Adobe PDF link that you had shared with us tomorrow. Okay,
and we'll just leave it open, and we can circle back and talk about whether it's time to close it next time we talk on the 17th, and hopefully after the 17th we will have everything we need to kind of move into the next phase of drafting. and kind of the next full draft. So, yeah. I will say, look at the, well, when you get the next chapters, it'll make sense, but some of the things, because we didn't look at the entire draft now, some of the things in terms of how, say, transportation, active transportation, parks and rec, community facilities, schools, how all those intersect with kind of the vision for, quality of life in Helena. Hopefully that'll all come into sharper focus when you have the other half of the plan. So stay tuned.
And House, I just want to commend all of you because it's easy to comment on a draft. It's really hard to come up with a good, readable, interesting, intriguing draft. And I think you've done that. So thank you.
We appreciate it.
Anyone else? Or anyone online? Yes, and so we did basically incorporate public comment into our discussion, but final call for public comment on this agenda item.
No hands raised.
All right, so with that, we will move on to the next and nearly last item, meetings of interest and announcements. Already stated that the next scheduled meeting is April 17th. April, did you say that was Zoom only?
So that will be Zoom only. I am traveling that day, so I will be unavailable to run a meeting here in the room. So it will be on Zoom for all you lovely people.
All right. Any other meetings of interest or announcements that staff have for us?
I do not.
All right. So if there is no objection from anyone in the room, I declare this meeting adjourned.
Thanks, Heather. Thank you, Oscar.
Thanks, everyone.
See you guys. Have a good night.
Night.
Yeah,